Today, my guest is former WWE developmental talent. I remember him from the Jersey Shore crew and his time in OVW, but we're going to take a deep dive into other various developmental territories he's been in and talk about how his career started, life after WWE, Mr. Danny Inferno. Danny, how are you?
Brian, thanks for having me, man. I know it's been a long time coming, so we tried to get this interview together. So, I'm just happy to be here. Thank you.
I appreciate you taking the time out, sir. When, so, when did professional wrestling first come into your life?
I would think I was 4 years old. I just moved to New Jersey from New York, and I had a friend named Adam, this little young guy. I don't even know who he is now, obviously, but he had this magazine open on his living room table, and it had Jimmy Superfly Snuka jumping off the cage. And I was, what is that? And he was like, telling me about wrestling, but I had no idea what wrestling was. And that just got me hooked, man. And then it was like, I went to a WWF show that was at a local high school here. They used to run high schools. And, man, I just fell in love with everything, man. So at that point, I just, not only the biggest fan, um, I'm probably one of the bigger, people on, if you want to ask questions like, what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, I can answer any question probably about anybody because that's how much of a big fan I was. But anyway, yeah, by the age of 15, I was already looking for a way into wrestling, and I got into wrestling through a newsletter. I started writing a newsletter. There weren't many out there then, and I started writing a newsletter with Tommy Fierro, who runs some great wrestling conventions and ISPW wrestling. And he's a pretty well known promoter. So yeah, man, it just took over my life. At that point, from such a young age, that was it.
How hard was it to find a school in that area back
Uh,
then?
Funny stories. The day I met Tommy Field, the day I met another guy named Tony Capone, who ran the NAWA in New York. He's a pretty well known promoter up here. He runs pretty well big events. Well, he used to, like Westchester County Center where WWE runs. And he would draw like 4 or 5 thousand people at a time. Uh, but I would walk around the arena and try to meet as many people as I could. Like I wanted to weigh in.
Mhm.
And I had been to an independent show and I saw Chris Candido. And I started talking to Candido there. And I saw him standing, him and Tammy Sitz were outside, like, the tunnel, so to speak, like the entranceway, but not the one where everybody's coming out from, but from the other one, like on the side, like they were trying to get a job too with WCW. And I made sure I went over and talked to him. And I was like, man, I want to wrestle so bad. Like, what can I do to get into wrestling? And so I fixed my camera a little bit there for you, cause it's probably. But anyway, I was like, what do I got to do? And he goes, find a wrestling school. I said, okay, how do I do that? Because I didn't even know there was a wrestling school. And it was actually Diamond Dallas Page, who then was like standing in that entranceway and said to me, there's a wrestling school in Lake Hiawatha, New Jersey, run by Gino Caruso and Rocky Jones. And, a lot of people might not know Rocky Jones. Rocky Jones is very big. He's an indie journeyman. He wrestled for WWF, WWF, and then traveled all over the world, and was very well known as far as that goes. He was like in the Johnny Rods type era.
Mhm.
And so I went there. I started inquiring how to wrestle. I lied about my age, said I was 18. I wasn't. I was 15. And at the time, nowadays, you hear about guys starting out so young. But when I got in, there wasn't really anybody my age that was breaking into the business at all.
Mhm.
It was very, very taboo for somebody my age. Like nowadays, people are like, oh, I broke in when I was 13, 14. And, whatever the case is. But um, there was nobody like me at the time. Everybody had to be 18. In the state of New Jersey, state of New York, you had to be 18 years old to get a license. And I remember the first time I started working in New Jersey and New York, I used to have to like go on between first match and third match, kind of something like that, like where the doctor and the state commission couldn't see me. I'd go wrestle and come back, like they wouldn't even know I wrestled because I was that young, So it was a different time than now. Guys get in so much earlier now, so which is cool. Like that's great because I know I had that same fire built in me, like back then. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. What was your first initial impression of training to become a professional wrestler? Was it harder than what you thought, or did you take well to it?
Um, man, it's been a long time when I started training, and I'm not talking about developmental, like when I got into that and all that stuff I got been through. But back then it was like different than I thought it was going to be
Mm-hmm.
because I only watched wrestling on television. I only knew like wrestlers from being on, like going into an independent show and seeing what's going on there, and um, I expected it to be a lot. I don't want to say easier because I didn't expect the bumps and bruises to be easier. I expected it to be easier just to like I didn't know about Matt's psychology and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Telling a story while you're wrestling, not the story like where like WWE's feeding you a storyline, and 6 months down the road this thing can end. I didn't know about even telling a match story, So to me, it was just let me show off as many moves as I can. I was a tall, lanky kid, but I admired like the light heavyweights. I was getting VHS tapes, from back in the day, and Super J Cup, which actually ask me about that later because that's actually a funny story. My Super J Cup entry, but yeah, like I just I didn't know what it all entailed, and I
Mm-hmm.
was so young, being 15. It took me really until like into my late 20s to start getting a business savvy sense of like what wrestling was and what it is and how I could have made money. And I think now, knowing what I know now, I could have probably made a lot more money than I did. But you know, we all look back. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
So, but I have no regrets. It's just you know, now I wish I knew then what I know now.
Did you now when you were training and you started working matches? Did you stay in that general area?
No, to be honest with you, when I turned 15, I went everywhere. And I was going up so I lived in New Jersey, the New York City area. I was going everywhere from like Maine to Virginia to the Carolinas. I went down to Florida a couple of times. I'm like 15, 16, 17. I missed my high school prom to go wrestle up in Boston, Massachusetts, So no, man, I wanted like once I got in, I was like, this is all I ever want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't matter to me like where, what I missed, what happened on everybody else's week or weekday, weekend. I just wanted to wrestle, so I didn't care. Matter of fact, on my prom weekend, I went and wrestled in Boston, Massachusetts. I drove straight down with the Metal Maniac, which if anybody doesn't know Metal Maniac, you can Google him, but he's actually a close friend of mine and he's a great guy. But he's got a well-known gimmick, so to speak, and I'll leave it at that. But I think he's an awesome, great guy. But he drove me back to New Jersey. I drove from that night down to the Jersey Shore to go hang out at my prom, and then drive from there to the NWA championship tournament. I don't know if you remember that, Brian, but the NWA was running back then the NWA was very resurfaced. They had brought back the world title and U.S. tag titles,
Mm-hmm.
which I actually got to hold, and it was flourishing. So that was a big deal. Like Al Snow, Chris Candido, guys like that were on the same card in the tournament. So I went back, did that show, then went right back to the shore. But that's basically like how my life was at the time. Because even through college, every weekend I was somewhere. I was on Raw, SmackDown, like doing all that. Like it was just always a part of my life. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like I don't remember it not being until like the recent years now. Like now.
When do you feel like you first started getting your name out there?
Uh, like, I think the year I started, it took me a little while, but I think like 97, 98, 1997, 98 is like where I started getting calls. Like one of my goals is always, I had all these goals set, like I want to be flown somewhere
Hmm.
on somebody else's dime and be paid. And that was around the time that started to happen. So, you got to remember a time like, and some people don't know me or don't know what I went through and don't remember that time that was before like the Attitude Era. But, um, you know, I got very out there by doing what I was doing,
Hmm.
by hustling. From my last year in high school, I was wrestling in Memphis. I was wrestling in Florida. I was wrestling, I was all over the place. And, that was around the time like I started getting like flights and stuff, which I know nowadays is pretty, I guess, a lot more common.
Hmm.
But for me to do that, that was like one of my big goals was to be able to be flown somewhere and paid and recognized for what I was doing. And don't get me wrong, I was not good at what I was doing then. I'm just saying that was the time I started getting out there and people started recognizing me. And so yeah, like I would say like 97, 98. Right before I got my first chance with the WWF or now WWE with WWF, probably around that time.
And how did you get on WWE's radar?
Uh, so I had mentioned the NWA before, and Dennis Corluzzo was a big time promoter in New Jersey. I don't know any independent promoter that was bigger than Dennis. Dennis appeared even on WWF television with Jim Cornette and presenting the NWA.
Hmm.
He represented Dan Severn in the Ultimate Fighting Championships, so he was always. A lot of people claim to know Dennis very well. I think I knew him probably better than anybody because I actually went to school down at Rowan University in South Jersey. I was 10 minutes from Dennis, and Dennis was one of those guys that took a chance on me, like he did with. He found Bam Bam Bigelow. He found X-Pac. He found Glenn Ruth, who's became the Headbangers. Like, you know what I mean? Like, he
Hmm.
found talent. He knew talent. Um, and a lot of my connections came from Dennis. But that's really how I got on the radar with WWF. Jim Cornette started booking for WWF. I called him out of nowhere, and I was like, I want to work. And he's like, all right, kid, come down. Like, he remembered my name from Dennis. Um, so I had kind of somebody to vouch for me if need be, but I didn't. And he called me up and said, come to TV. And I wrestled my first TV match. Um, and I also did like, that week I did a couple different things. What was the sexy utility guy for WWE? Like I was on the cover of Raw magazine with the Dudley Boys. I'm the guy that there's a table broken on one of these covers of Raw magazine, and I'm the guy laying through the table. But that was always my job as a utility guy.
Hmm.
They relied on me a lot for little things like that. But yeah, um, I think that was like how I got on the radar. It was just through knowing somebody, and I think that's a big part of it.
Hmm.
Because I don't say I'm more talented than anybody else, or I like to me I didn't become what I thought was decent until like 10, 12 years into my wrestling career, where I was like, I know what I'm doing.
Hmm.
I know how to do it better than anybody else. And or hearing that from my peers that were better than me, it took me a long time. But I think that's around the time yet.
Now, how long after you started working these dark matches and doing these jobs for WWE did developmental come into play? Like, did you do this for a couple years before an offer was extended?
Yeah, before I got my initial contract offer, so I got a contract offer in the Attitude Era, and Kevin Kelly was in charge of talent relations back then, and he asked me about being employed and whatever, and I was in college at the time, and I had been wrestling for WWF and WWE then, well, WWF still, uh, for a couple of years, and at the point where I was wrestling for them every week for a long time, and guys on the roster thought I was under contract, and I was getting like a guy under contract draw every night
Hmm.
too. I wasn't getting like the independent like extra money. So and that happened for a while, but so he asked me like, "Do you want to work full time for us?" And I was like, "Yeah." And we talked for a while, for a couple of weeks, and then he goes, "You know what? Finish college. Your job is going to be here no matter what. They love you." Okay.
Hmm.
Mistake number one, as far as if I want to make it in wrestling, but now looking back, at least I got my college career out of it.
Hmm.
But then, what happened was, so from like 97 to 2002, I had wrestled hundreds, at least 100 and something matches with WWE.
Hmm.
And besides like my extra spots and all the other stuff I did, like, being in WrestleMania as a cop, like that kind of stuff. But I was booked so much. And 2002, and I'll say his name, Dr. Tom Pritchard, came into me. No, it was Bruce Pritchard or Dr. Tom? Maybe Bruce Pritchard. I was getting dressed in the locker room. I was going to work with Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas. Me and Danny Dorian against Shelton and Charlie Haas. And he just came in out of nowhere and goes, "Just so you know, we're not hiring you." And I was like, "You just did this in front of like wrestlers. You did this in front of everybody. You didn't tell me that." Like I've been working with this company for 7 years now, and they don't owe me shit. They
Hmm.
don't owe me anything. But it was kind of like, okay. Um, but I was so pissed that night, man. I was so pissed, and I'm like, I'm gonna shove it up their ass, and I'm gonna have them hire me,
Hmm.
and that's what I did later on. Uh, but yeah, that's kind of how it came about, at least the first part of it. But I had done Memphis Championship Wrestling. I had done Heartland with like Les
Hmm.
Thatcher's. I was in Puerto Rico for the other one. Like, I had been in every single like developmental they ever had, and I would stay there for a few months not under contract, but just
Hmm.
working independently. Um, so from high school on, I had been doing that. And so when guys say like, "Oh, I slept in my car and I did this and that," well, I understand that, but I did it for years,
Hmm.
trying to make WWE. So, and I understand everybody's struggle. Everybody's different, man. I wish I was 6 feet. I'm 6'4", but I mean, man, I wish I was like 6'8", and I could have had a better ride, an easier ride, but I didn't.
Which was the first developmental territory you went to?
The first was Memphis. I had worked with Jerry Lawler quite a bit, and Memphis Championship Wrestling, I think, was the first. And Randy Hills. Is it Randy Hills? Randy Hills. And yeah, Jerry Lawler. That's how I got with Jerry Lawler. Last time I actually I wrestled Jerry Lawler in his first match back from having his heart attack on TV in New York. And Jerry just he always liked me. He's like, you're one of the safest guys I've ever wrestled. He's like, so if I see him on an independent show, guess who I wrestled? He
Hmm.
would choose me, which is kind of an honor, sure, though, you know what I mean? So,
Absolutely.
yeah. But that was the first Memphis Championship Wrestling. And I went down with a girl named Bobcat, or Cindy Snow, which people know her as now. She's Al Snow's former wife. They got divorced. She's been a real great friend of mine for a long time. Beautiful girl. And when I started really trying to get myself out there, I was traveling with her like pretty much 24/7. We were a good match together,
Hmm.
And to be honest with you, like when I went down to like the NWA, like Bill Barron's, and I was doing those territories for a while, for months at a time. Bobcat is the one who made us money. I got paid X amount of dollars because I knew, and literally they would tell me just because Dennis Caruso, but don't tell our wrestlers how much we're paying you.
Hmm.
So I was getting like pretty much New Jersey, New York independent pay 5 days a week. They ran all the time, from Tennessee to Georgia. And she's the one who got in the ring every day and did Polaroids and sold our merchandise and everything else, and kept us going, with a rental car, hotels, food, everything else. So, I handed it to her there.
So, what was your first initial thoughts of Memphis?
I love Memphis, man. And I didn't really know like Memphis until like probably a year before I went there for the first time.
Hmm.
I always knew about Memphis, but I didn't know like who was running Memphis. I didn't know who came through Memphis. I didn't know how much of a big deal Memphis was
Hmm.
until I got down there. And when I got there and I realized like wrestling at where's that place that TNA used to run? When TNA first fairgrounds, National
Hmm.
Fairgrounds. It was my first show with a Memphis organization. And to see fans like lined up outside and like there's so much into the history of it and everything else, like I was just like, wow. And that was my first chance of getting to see really, because I never did it until this point. And believe me, like I'm known as a guy who now, I mean, I haven't wrestled in a long time, but now a guy who does everything on the fly, so to
Hmm.
speak. That was my first on the fly because they don't talk before anything. Everything, whether it's TV or whether it's house shows, basically you're separated and you won't see somebody until you get in the ring and the
Hmm.
referee will type and finish. Uh, but I got to wrestle at Channel 5 and then, the local Memphis, and I got to do that. And I was, I just loved it. And then looking back now, it's like, wow, I was really fortunate to have gone through that.
Hmm.
And it's funny because that Channel 5, like I'm getting out, like, just like I did the first OVW run, was getting changed outside in my car
Hmm.
and holding a towel up for Bobcat so she can get changed. You know, um, Wrestling at 9 in the morning when everyone else is hungover in Memphis on Channel 5, like just so you know, everybody on TV there is like hungover as crap, and they're coming in and do television at like 9 o'clock in the morning live. You know, but it was fun, and looking back, it was amazing because now obviously, well, then I knew, but like obviously now I know what a big part of wrestling
Hmm.
and the territories that Memphis was, and how much it meant to their fans. Uh, it's pretty cool, and it's pretty cool to have been a part of the last part of I think Memphis wrestling. I think I got in at the tail end, like kind of when it was finishing up.
Hmm.
I know it's still there. I know it exists, but I think that was probably the tail end of like when it was dying out
Yeah.
as a major thing. Yeah, and I got to be a part of that. So I really can't complain about it. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. So after
And I'll be honest with you, like, and I don't tell anybody this, and actually I don't care if you tell me this, whatever. Um, it sucks because a lot of the guys there didn't get paid. And I remember seeing a guy cry in the locker room because he was promised some money and never got paid. And here I am. I was getting paid pretty well for Memphis from Jerry Lawler. And I just felt bad, because I'm like, these guys make no money. And they're wrestling 5 nights a week, plus working regular jobs. It's,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So when you went from Memphis, and then where did you go after that? Because this is like maybe like newer fans don't understand how developmental was. Like they would keep an eye on you for a while, and they would have like I know OVW, FCW, and all that was you could pay to be there or be paid to be there, and I don't think it's like that anymore. So like you got to travel and like do different styles and work for different companies and stuff, which I think is a necessity to be a well-rounded performer. So after Memphis, where did you go next?
Um, it's like it's kind of a blur to me because
Hmm.
I just wanted to get booked everywhere.
Hmm.
So not my first run in Puerto Rico, but I went to Puerto Rico, but I don't even know if they were developmental then. But it was like Nashville, Ohio. I would stay weeks at a time.
Hmm.
I never had to pay to be anywhere. I
Hmm.
never paid to be at OVW before I got signed, and that was the thing. If you weren't signed, you were going to join
Hmm.
OVW as like Danny Davis's student. I'm fortunate enough that with the connections I had, it's not my talent. It's connections that I made over the years that I was able to get in
Hmm.
certain places. So when I went to Puerto Rico, I could wrestle, for the whole summer before I had to go back to college, and I would make good money. Like after WWE, like when I went to wrestle in Puerto Rico and Bushwhacker Luke was running, Puerto Rico, he called me right away and was like, "Hey, mate, come down here." I was just been very fortunate. I
Hmm.
think it's just, I think guys in my area here, because like we had a New Jersey type clique of people, a
Hmm.
couple different guys that were independents, and we always ran with each other and got each other booked. Got kind of a bad rep, but otherwise, and I don't mean a bad rep as far as like not being able to work with people or anything like that, but it was like we were very cliquish um, in the New Jersey area. And New York City had another one.
Hmm.
Like some of the guys that worked there, like SAT and Homicide and Red, like some of those guys, they were a different clique. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And but we would get on the same shows, and then we'd all be cool. But then like when we weren't, it was like your fans telling you all they're talking shit about you, like that kind. It was just back
Hmm.
then. But yeah, I just it wasn't like I went anywhere in particular. I just went everywhere I could. I mean, if I could wrestle in Florida, I pretty much stayed on the Eastern Coast. I mean, Mississippi, like anywhere I can get to that I can book shows, and I would call.
Hmm.
Back then, like we didn't have internet like it is now. Uh, we had like a AOL, and I would find like organizations that are running and find the dates they're running, call the promoter, and I was putting myself out there, and they're like, "Yeah, if you're in the area, come in."
Hmm.
So I was really booking like my own tours. I didn't have anybody to help me do it. It was just a lot of hard work and trying to get myself out there. But I would work anywhere, man. And I was willing to like I said, like Puerto Rico to Maine and everywhere else in between. Uh, and do the best I can so that way those people invited me back, to have me again.
Hmm. How was your time at HWA working with Les Thatcher and them?
That's probably my um, most limited developmental
Hmm.
because I did a couple shows for them. I loved it. It reminded me of the old OVW. Um, when OVW was in Indiana. It, yeah, it was. I didn't get I wasn't a part of like the Brian Pillman show era.
Hmm.
Like I was there during that time, but not like I didn't get to experience those shows. But and I didn't get to train with like Les or anything
Hmm.
like that. It's like I came in just to work shows
Okay.
because I was now there. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Hmm.
So but from there I went to OVW, which was completely different. Um, and not like I trained there, but I wrestled there for a while. So I got to wrestle some great guys like Nick Dinsmore and Flash Flanagan and guys like that. Like I was on television wrestling those guys in like
Hmm.
late '90s, and for me it was like I love these guys. That's kind of where I started to know about when you mentioned Memphis wrestling and stuff
Hmm.
like that before, realizing that these guys are out there that are this good.
Hmm.
So when
Now,
I got to those territories, it was like, man, these are the guys I want to work with, and guess what? Those are the guys I did work with. So
mhm.
it was awesome.
Now, did you go to OVW before you were signed, or did you go after you got signed?
I was in OVW in the late '90s before I got signed. Um, it was a small building in Indiana. Like I told
Hmm.
you before, getting dressed in my car. I remember it was so hot out. And I remember me and Bobcat, Cindy Snow had this rental car, and we were getting dressed outside the car, and it was so hot. And when you did TV back then, that this is the time that right before you had Brock Lesnar there,
Hmm.
or in Cena, and some of those guys from the Memphis area were trickled in, but then you started getting in those guys that were that magic era when I say like OVW was creating like everybody.
Hmm.
Uh, so man, I love OVW. Every aspect of OVW from the old location to the new one. It's the best time of my life. No joke. There's nothing like having been in OVW back then. I
Hmm.
don't know how it is now, but I guarantee it can't fit anything like it
Hmm.
is. And well,
Yep.
you've seen it, so you lived it. And there's nothing like what was going on then.
Hmm.
I don't think still, you could change the lighting, you could change with the way the ring looks and the people look and everything else, and you can interchange characters and whatnot. But I don't think booking wise, and I haven't watched it, but I can just guarantee nothing was
Hmm.
like it used.
I know I have Jim Cornette. Hello, Kentucky, Anna. Welcome to 4400 Shepherdsville Road, like burned in my brain because that was as a kid growing up watching that, and then listening to
Yeah,
Dean Hill and Kenny Bolin, and so like for me being from Seymour, like I got to see you guys a lot because of Rip and everybody, and so like when people would go from OVW to TV, like that was more exciting for me because I knew who everybody was. Like I was
right.
seeing you guys weekly, so it was always something more special for me to see, because I knew back then for developmental was outside of Kentuckiana, nobody saw OVW or Memphis or like it was all separated.
I'll tell you what, man. Being a wrestling fan myself, like, see, you're lucky because you knew every week if you went to OVW, anywhere that we ran, whether it was our house shows or
Hmm.
TV, you're looking at who's going to be on television
Hmm.
at some point, and you knew that. So you're watching all that happen, like in the infancy of it all. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, excuse me. The Seymour, Indiana, like I know that's where Rip's from, right?
Hmm.
So you probably, got the chance to see some pretty good indie wrestling there because I know there's a lot of stuff up in that area. But man, when you mentioned like OVW only being on a certain area, it's so crazy to know that like I think we were at the time like WB Network,
Hmm.
and we would go to towns and there would be people with lawn signs like to welcome us to town, and there'd be people standing outside their houses and their kids would be holding up signs. I've never seen something like that in my life. And
Hmm.
yeah, it was awesome because you could be wrestling at a high school, in front of a couple hundred people, but guess what? 12 o'clock in the afternoon, those kids were standing outside and their parents are there outside wearing OVW t-shirts and like holding up signs like
Hmm.
welcome, and that kind of thing. So it was like it was probably the craziest as far as like if you think independent, but I don't ever consider them an independent. I consider them more of a territory because we work, anywhere from shit, northern Kentucky, um, right into Indiana for some shows, all the way down to southern Kentucky and across. Like it was just, and you're on television. I just consider it more of a territory than
Mm-hmm.
a developmental. And I'm not developmental, an independent organization when we ran house shows. And I never, what's the word I want to use? Yeah, like I never consider them like independent or anything. I consider them like the minor league
Mm-hmm.
of WWE. And I've always considered them that, like, because Danny Davis just always ran the most amazing program, and it was Danny and it was Jim Cornette, and they just had everything so perfected,
Mm-hmm.
for a smaller organization to be so perfected, and then to blow it up, like it would be like having WWE run on all cylinders on television, having their guys develop everything. And there's so many cogs in that network, but they had it all going, and they had it all going perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't behind the scenes, so like, I don't know ticket sales and things like that. Like I don't know the business end of it, but from a wrestler's point of view, um, they really had everything just clicking all the time on all cylinders. Marketing, our house shows. In our house shows, could have a couple people versus a couple. I'm sure you've seen some of
Mm-hmm.
them, like where there was nobody there
Mm-hmm.
versus, and then I never forget it. Like Mark Henry was coming off an injury. Here's Mark Henry, and he's wrestling in front of 7 people.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next week, we're at a gym and we've got 1,000 people. So it was like E Town or like one of the like one of those
Mm-hmm.
good towns in Kentucky like that we ran consistently that did really well. Um, it was just a well-oiled machine all the time, and I always, I don't know what's the word, appreciate it or
Mm-hmm.
more. Not that I appreciate it for me, but just appreciate it for being what it was. Like
Mm-hmm.
I give a lot of credit to it because
So
those guys, everybody from top to bottom, and I'm going to forget a million names. That's why I'm not going to name them. But let's start with Danny Davis and Jim Cornette. Just amazing. I mean, come
mm-hmm.
on.
So what led to you signing your developmental deal? You've done all this traveling. What finally led pen to paper?
Well, in 2002, I told you they told me they were never going to hire me, and I said,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I can curse here,
You
but I'll
can.
say F you, F you.
Mm-hmm.
And really, that's exactly what I meant. I said, fuck you. I've worked too hard for this. I got my body in shape. I did everything you wanted me to do, from being a lanky little kid to I did everything they asked me to do to tell me they're not going to hire me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, fuck you. You're going to hire me. So in 2003, I called Jim Cornette and I said, Jim, I'm quitting my job in New Jersey. I'm moving to Kentucky. I want to work for OVW. How much is it going to cost me? Like, what's the deal? And through my contacts, luckily, Danny Davis agreed to let me come work out. I was one of maybe 2 people, I think, that I joined the WWE class. So everybody on the developmental was in one class, and everybody else was in OVWs in other classes. And I think I was like one of maybe one. I may have been the only one, but maybe one other guy that was allowed in that class for free. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
pay for anything in OVW. And my thing was that the deal I made with Jim Cornette was I do their house shows for free, and I could train for free and get all the exposure and everything else. So I said, okay. So like whenever I did any house show for OVW, I had to make sure I was there, even though I had another job trying to like support myself.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the trade off. was that I was there for anything they wanted. And yeah, it worked out. And literally a year after I was there, like, and don't get me wrong, I was disheartened, and I went through a lot, went through different trainers. I went to the point where we had Lance Storm, we had Al Snow, we had Bill DeMott, and Al Snow. And people don't know this, Bill DeMott trained me when I was in New Jersey, and Devin Storm, Chris Ford, Crowbar from WCW. We were two of the students in New Jersey. Because like I told you before, like when I went and trained, it wasn't just at one school. I went and trained at 3 different schools. I trained at Iron Mike Sharp School in South New Jersey. I trained at Tommy Cairo. If you remember him from ECW, the original ECW, like the old school ECW. He had a school. And that's where I met Bill DeMott. And Bill DeMott trained the shit out of me. But he prepared me for everything. So when I went and wrestled at OVW and Bill DeMott came in, people were scared. And I'm like, it's another day.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So that's why I loved working with him, for him. He's probably one of the most underrated, and I hate using that word underrated, but one of the most underrated minds in pro wrestling. He gets it. And he knows as a wrestler, he gets it. And if you don't agree with that, then fuck you. Seriously. No, I'm serious. Because if you're that much of a pussy that you can go through bumps and bruises of being trained by Bill DeMott, then fuck you. And if you have to edit that, edit.
You're fine.
But I'm just going to say straight up, like, there's nothing Bill DeMott will put you through that you're not going to go through. And that's what he trains you for. He trains you to be the toughest person in pro wrestling and get the best, to be the best professional you can be and never crack. That's how hard he trains you. And there's nothing unsafe about what he's ever done. And I trained Bill in OVW and DeepSouth, which I'm sure you're going to get to. I worked with Bill for years and years. He's never done one thing that makes somebody ever get injured. If you were injured, you're always able to step off and not work. A lot of things said about this guy has been very, very wrong. And I'll mention in his book, and it's not because I'm a friend of Bill DeMott. It's just because I respect what he's done, and I respect how he trains people. And yes, if you were going to Japan and train with like New Japan and that kind of thing, you're not going to expect less than that. He's lesser intense than that. So I just never got the all the hoopla about Bill DeMott, like, and his reputation, because really, if you're going to be a pro wrestler, he's training you to be a pro wrestler.
Absolutely. So was he your favorite trainer during your time at OVW?
Not only my favorite, just because he was very hard on me, particularly. Me being a New Jersey guy, he's from New Jersey. He's from like a couple towns away from me. And I had trained with him earlier in life, and I traveled with me and Bill almost got killed in a car accident in Boston. Me, him, and Crowbar. We were driving back from Boston when I was younger, and our car spun out of control on ice, and we almost got killed. It was went off a bridge. And it wasn't that, but like Bill DeMott was the kind of guy that messed probably with me more than people. There was a couple of us that Bill really loved, and he would mess with you more because he loved you. Was he my favorite? No, it isn't good like being favorite, because at the time I wanted to learn from everybody. Here I had Lance Storm teaching me. I had Al Snow teaching me. I had Rip Rogers teaching me. I had Jim Cornette teaching me. I've had Hugh Morris teaching me. I've had, so I had like the best education you could possibly receive. And Danny Davis, like, you name it. Nick Dinsmore, like whoever stepped in. Nova, who's my old tag team partner, like, just to get and feed off all this information was just It was amazing.
Hmm.
So it's still my favorite, not necessarily. Um, when I got to Deep South, I was working with Dave Taylor instead of Bill DeMott because I couldn't at that point in my career, I couldn't take the bumps that Bill was like, repetitive stuff. I had already been repetitive. I already knew my business. I already knew at that point, like what I needed to do to be successful, to draw money, like I had everything in place. It just wasn't in place yet
Hmm.
where I needed it to be. So I didn't do the bumping and bruising every day. I needed to learn psychology a little bit more, a little different psychology, or learn somebody else's psychology. So I actually moved to Dave Taylor's class. Um, if everybody doesn't know Dave Taylor, then you're an idiot if you're watching. Uh, but you know what I'm saying? Like, so he wasn't necessarily my favorite. You know, they were easier people to work with. As far as like bumps and bruises, like Lance Storm was awesome. Alston was awesome. It's all psychology. It's not the bumps and bruises. We still went through the routines of the bumps and bruises because you have to keep it up. But
Hmm.
they all had something to offer. Every single one of them. And Rip Rogers, nobody complains about Rip Rogers. He's noted as one of the best trainers ever, right?
Hmm.
I've never bumped more and done more repetitive stuff and like aged my career and body more than Rip Rogers. But guess what? It's just his approach to things.
Hmm.
It's versus a building not. So, but I was so fortunate for free to not only have already been trained, but then retrained by WWE in all these different aspects and seminars. Like the day I got signed, Undertaker was literally sitting in OVW.
That's pretty
And I was
amazing.
late. Here, I'll tell you a funny story. I was late to class, like 15 minutes late. And the reason I was late is because right as I'm ready to go to OVW to work out, something slid under my door. And it was a FedEx envelope. And I rip it open and it's my contract. And I was like, I go sit on my bed and I'm reading everything, and I'm just like, man, this is everything I worked for. I'm like, oh shit, I gotta go to work. So I went there and I remember, I'll never forget the day I opened the door. And if you walked into OVW back then during the day, when you open that door on the side, the sunlight would just open up the whole side of this whole arena. And that's basically what happened. And I look over and I see the Undertaker talking to our entire class. And I'm like, this sucks. And I walked right up to him like, I'm very sorry for being late. I just got signed today. And he looked at me for a second and he goes, all right, that's excusable. And then and then everybody was like all happy about it. I was freaked the hell out. But actually, he was really good to me during WWE. Like little known thing, like I was supposed to do a program with. Um, he was watching me for a little bit to do some kind of program. I don't know what it was, but he really liked me for some reason. I don't know, what it was that he saw in me, but
Well,
yeah.
that's pretty amazing. During your time in OVW, did they know what they wanted to do with you? Did you have good input on what character wise you wanted to do? And
Um, I was fortunate because when I got there, literally within 3 weeks, I was on TV
hmm.
in a major spot. And people were kind of jealous. I remember like guys even like coming up to me that were in like other classes that weren't with WWE classes and stuff. He's like, how did you do that? And I'm like, I don't know what to say to you. Like, business is business. Like, am I better than you? No. Am I, whatever the case was. But, I fell into luck with the Jersey Shore crew, which was me, Aaron Stevens, or Idol Stevens. I don't know what he works by now. And Nova, so, and Trinity Dinucci, which she was so underrated. This girl was amazing. She like was there for every spot I needed her to ever be there
Hmm.
for. She was there. So, but being under that learning tree of, a 6-man tag, was phenomenal. And we got really, really, really major heat.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you remember it, but I think 90% of the time we got probably more heat than anybody on our show. We
You were
were
hated.
just in business for almost a year.
You guys were definitely hated.
Yeah. I mean, at Six Flags Great Adventure, I had a woman broke her leg. Remember the old lady? She was the old lady who used to sit at ringside in the Indiana shows and bring her sons with her. These big kids. She tried to jump over the railing at us. Like she really hated us. But we were getting like real heat. It was fun. Uh, and OVW is kind of I don't know how it is now because I went there. I did do one more show. I went back for a reunion type thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I did one show. And I don't know if fans line up outside. Back in the day, like fans would line up like 150, 200 fans outside every day waiting
Mm-hmm.
for TV. And you were probably there, like
Mm-hmm.
it. I'm not lying about it. Like it
Nope.
was crazy. Starting like 11 o'clock in the afternoon, like when I got there, like for free show stuff. There's people lined up outside, man. They got their lawn chairs. They're waiting to get in. They can't wait. It's rabid. Um, but when I went to OVW, I was fortunate, really fortunate this time, because to be put on television, I was probably one of the only non WWE guys that were on television. Me and Trudy Danucci actually, because she didn't have a contract yet, um, and which sucked because she deserved one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that whole act of the Jersey Shore crew. I remember I wrote down a bunch of stuff, and I'm sure Nova did too. And I'm not privy to that, but I said stuff to the office, and apparently Vince McMahon said, "I don't know what a Jersey Shore crew is," and I said, "Okay, do you remember this show Jersey Shore, which came out like that year?" And
Mm-hmm.
this would be huge. Everybody knows what a Jersey Shore crew is. But
Mm-hmm.
he didn't see it, so that's why they broke us up. I think that's why they broke us up. Nova went on to become Simon Dean. Aaron went on to become Edel Stevens, and then also Damian Sandow. I got released. Trudy never got a contract, so it's just
Mm-hmm.
who knows.
Mm-hmm. Is there any particular moments in OVW that stand out more than others for you?
Um, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of OVW moments, a lot of house show moments, but I remember Steven debuting, just jumping the guardrail and making sure I'd slip off the top rope, which was my debut. Like they were doing some kind of match with garbage can or something, Kevin Furtick 7, or
Mm-hmm.
how would fans know him better as Vampire?
Mm-hmm. Kevin
Come
Thorne.
on, help. Kevin Thorpe and Tom Go. So that was like my first introduction to OVW, and that's who I started doing house shows with. And I was petrified. So I'm like, man, I'm only on the independents. And I got these two huge dudes, my size and even bigger, like to work with. Uh, so it was just like making sure I hit my mark and like hitting the trash can the right way on 7. But man, there's so many moments in OVW. Um, and I have so many good friends still from this, to this day. Some of my best friends are still people from OVW. So um, I was there for a lot of things, man. I was there for a lot of things. People ask me about the boogeyman
Mm-hmm.
and me knocking out his teeth and that sort of thing. I don't know, if you know about that, but that was a thing that I'll never forget. And by the way, I love Boogeyman. He knows there was no problem there, like whatsoever,
Mm-hmm.
because that's how screwed up things get backstage. Is people start feeding people information like he did it on purpose. He's
Mm-hmm.
Bill DeMott hitman guy, and no. not at all. I've never hurt anybody. Like I'm like kind of like Bret Hart. Like I've never hurt anybody in wrestling. Uh, it was just a wrong spot where things hit, and I knocked all of his teeth out. That's why the boogeyman has, and I'm not proud of that. Believe me, I'm not. I hate it. I hate it.
Hmm.
But a lot of stuff is just backstage stuff. It's like being at practice. Things that I did. People always back then called me the grizzled vet in our classes. So
Hmm.
like it was me, and then there's Carlito, and Carlito was slower than me, which is impossible. So when we get in the ring in the beginning of the practice, we crisscross and do like these opening drills to get your blood warmed up and everything.
Hmm.
And me and Carlito would roll in together all the time. And then like Mickey James would be like, yeah! And we would crisscross, crisscross so slow. But honestly, I don't think we were really trying to be slow. I think it's just, that was our pace. But just that kind of stuff, man. Like my old roommate, Shad Gaspard, Beast, who obviously died in a very horrific accident saving his child. He was my roommate for a long time. So that's something I always remember from there. And man, one of my best friends just died from OVW. Mike Taylor, and probably the most underrated guy in all of the WWE developmental WWE system when he got called up temporarily and then got pushed down. Um, just died a couple weeks ago, and there's just a lot of stuff. I think probably the most thing I'm known for besides the Jersey Shore crew and my uh, probably my battle with Aaron Stevens afterwards. Um, is probably breaking CM Punk's nose in his first debut match with WWE. So that's usually like I get asked about that a lot. But I'm sure you got a question coming up
I
about
don't.
that.
Well, how does that make you feel? Like, why you just automatically are accused of doing something? Like, I don't think you purposely would have done something to intentionally hurt somebody, but that's the story and rumor that's going around, as it was, or you're the hitman, so to speak.
Yeah, I read an interview that Punk did like 2 years ago, and every time I've seen Punk for the last 10 years, anytime I see him anywhere, um, we're cordial. I like Sam, by the way. To me, he's a good dude. Some people have a different opinion of him, but I think he's straight up, and I
Hmm.
appreciate that. And later in my life, I've become straight edge, so I've been like on that same par of we live the
Hmm.
same kind of life like that. Um, the the reputation like that I hurt somebody like that can go two ways, right?
Hmm.
People look at Meng like he's the most deadliest guy in wrestling, which I've wrestled in, and I've never had anybody smoother, but I know what he can do.
Hmm.
I've wrestled a lot of Samoans. I've wrestled like a lot of people in his bloodline. I know what they can do. So professionally, like no, I hate that because I actually tore my quad in that match. I literally tore my entire quad like Triple H did in that one match where he tore his quad. Right in one of the first opening spots in that match. And my adrenaline just kept me going. People don't know I actually tore my quad in that match. All they know is that like I busted his nose open.
Hmm.
Um, and I obviously no, I did not do it on purpose. I was nobody's hitman. My goal at the time was getting pulled up on the roster. So like, why would I hurt somebody?
Hmm.
Uh, and I don't want to hurt somebody like anybody, no matter what. Like there's nobody, because then the receipt's always coming. Like what's going to happen to you then? Like can you get dropped on your head and your neck broken?
Hmm.
Which I saw. I was there live when somebody got their neck broken and paralyzed. Who's no longer with us anymore on a WWE show. So I was the next match on when that happened with somebody, and I just, I took everybody's safety very, very, very much to heart. Uh, it was one of those things like in OVW, my punch was a finisher.
Mm-hmm.
We made it a finisher. So when I punched somebody, they were knocked out. And when I hit Punk, it was just an off setting of, push come to shove type thing.
Mm-hmm.
But since I've seen him, no, I was like, everything's been cool. But then I saw him, when you get a little more famous and, somebody asks you a question, he's like, oh yeah, some guy in OVW did this to me and broke my nose on purpose. And I'm like, come on, man.
Mm-hmm.
That's bullshit. Some guy, like, you know who I am. We've done a million wrestling shows together. Me and him have been on a million independent shows. We're in OVW together. He's wrestled me a bunch of times. Like, come on. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like I don't know if it was just taken out of context or if he was taking a shot or.
Yeah, like, no, I just think at the point, like, like him mentioning me does nothing for his
Yeah.
career, like, so why even mention my name?
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to do anything for my career either because I don't have a career anymore. I'm out of wrestling. So, like, it's like, why even mention him? But it was like kind of more of a dismissive thing. And to me, that's disrespectful, like not to acknowledge what I did, I guess, in wrestling or with him. But in the same vein, he's wrestling, world champion, UFC, big name for himself. He makes millions of dollars. He does not have to mention my name.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So that'd be more of an ego thing if I thought of it like that. And believe me, I have no ego whatsoever. It's just, I just don't have any, I don't have any ill will.
Mm-hmm.
And I would never try to hurt somebody intentionally ever. And that was, I think, the biggest thing to me is somebody ever implying that I hurt him on intentionally, because I never would.
Now, how long after this, or what led to you going to Deep South?
Deep South was an idea, and I heard I was one of the guys because Bill DeMott was opening Deep South, and I heard that I was an idea for Deep South. And originally, coming off my torn quad, I had a lot of momentum going back in OVW as a big baby face from being a heel. And I actually talked with everybody, like, anybody I could with WWE that I can have access to was
Mm-hmm.
why I shouldn't be booked and be brought to Deep South. I also had, a girlfriend at the time for now 3 years that I lived together with in Kentucky. I really didn't want to be moved, to another territory, let alone a brand new territory that wasn't even built yet, from like friends of mine who told me, like Miz and Mike Taylor, Mike Knox, some of the guys that are originals from Deep South were telling me, like, there's nothing here. It's literally a dirt floor. So I was going to go from being on television as a very supported and prominent person on television to going to nothing and starting from new, which was fine. And I wish I would have known that earlier because Paul Heyman, who I don't want to go into the Paul Heyman and when I talked about before, Dennis Corluzzo dynamic, because people could go look that up on the internet. But that was the ECW NWA thing from back in the day where Shane Douglas threw down the NWA title, so Paul Heyman has known me for a long time. Matter of fact, I never told I told a couple people this, but not many people know. The week before ECW closed, I got hired by ECW. So my career could have went completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew Paul had no ill will to me whatsoever. Just I wish I would have known because when I wanted TV time with OVW, when he started writing TV at the end of my OVW tenure,
Mm-hmm.
TV was awesome. It was different than what Jim Cornette was writing. And I really didn't get an opportunity there because I was coming off an injury and just trying to still get my face and foot in the door kind of with Paul
Mm-hmm.
again. Um, and for him to reintroduce another character on in a 1 hour show, that it just probably didn't make sense at the time. But so I didn't want to move to Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
I looked it up and I'm like, man, this is like 23 miles south of Atlanta. It's in the middle of nowhere, brand new. But when I finally got moved there, I was like, all right, we got something here, and I had Jody Hamilton. I had, Nick Patrick, Jody's son,
Mm-hmm.
Dave Taylor, Bill DeMott. And people were rooting for me in their corner, so there was a lot of change, in my character and what I was doing. And sometimes I don't know if that was detrimental to my career or it helped at the time. I just don't know, but it wasn't a bad thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I always looked at it as, I thought it was going to be very bad because I was in such a prominent spot with OVW and like a featured babyface, like where I was, one of the top three coming back for off my injury, top three baby faces like that we had.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought things were going to get like really hot with that. But then to me moved, it was like fizzled down. And within a couple months, you know, I don't know how long I was at OVW if I have to look back at it, to remember, but that it didn't do well for my career.
Mm-hmm. So how was it working with Dave Taylor down in Deep South? And you said that it was a little bit different for you. Did they not want you to be Danny Inferno? Were they trying different things? Because the stuff I've seen from Deep South was more, it seemed like more characters than.
With Deep South, yeah, Bill's idea for me was to let them forget you. So like I cut my hair shorter. I used my real name as my wrestling name. I changed from being Danny Inferno to Danny Jamondo. Um, my right hand was still my gimmick, because I throw a real amazing looking right hand punch. Uh, just to me, maybe because it was new, like we were on Comcast there, which got, I think it was broadcast in 18 states. We had a wide view of potential audience.
Hmm.
So it wasn't that. It just didn't have that feel like OVW did. OVW felt like it was like contained chaos, so to speak. I don't know how to explain that. But when you came out of OVW, like, and as a performer, you can do certain things, and you knew like where to look for cameras and things. Whereas Blue South, even though we had Comcast running it, and cameras, and Neil Pruitt was a guy that did the voice for the NWO, like NWO, like he was the guy who did it. All the NWO videos and everything.
Hmm.
That's the guy who shot it. So we had amazing guys with production and stuff, but it was just like, I don't know. It's just never like when I walked out of the curtain, it never felt like OVW,
Hmm.
you know? And I think even though you're wrestling in a ring, which is the same four corners, people on all sides, it just had a completely different feel to it, you know?
Hmm.
And I'm not going to say the writing was bad because Jody Hamilton and Bill DeMott did a great job with writing. Dave Taylor as a coach, because you mentioned him, he's awesome. I cannot be more of a better advocate for Dave Taylor. Told me things I would have learned, like, like things I've learned, like by Steven Regal, because they're really good friends.
Hmm.
Uh, Dave Taylor just very, like, works smart, not hard. Like conserve your body type
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah.
And so he would show us stuff and repetitively do it, but he's like, fuck, if you're not going to use it in a match, like, why am I going to sit here and drill you and drill you and drill you and drill you? Now you know it. If it's there, you do it. But he was so good and so underrated. This guy can legit, I'm not even kidding you, can lock up with you and put you in a million holds and put himself in a million holds without you doing anything. He could probably entertain the first part of 10 minutes of a match without me ever having to manipulate one thing. He'll just do it all. And I've never met anybody like that. Besides Greg.
Were you still being used frequently before your release came, or was it something that just came out of nowhere?
Like when I left OVW, I really wasn't being used much at all. And Cole had the sponsor of like, if we give you 1 second of TV time or 5 minutes or whatever it is, use the most of it. And every single week after our television debut, was like, when I'm ready to go and I'm in amazing shape, like the best shape of my life, I'm ready to go. And I kept saying, where's my 2 minutes of TV time?
Hmm.
Every single meeting, I would raise my hand. Anything else you guys want to say about tonight? And I would do that every time. I just never pulled the plug on anything. So um, it was disheartening and pissed me off a bit, going from being at such a level with OVW and knowing that I had certain plans with TV to move to, WWE TV,
Hmm.
and it wasn't happening. So when I got moved to Deep South, I was being used pretty prominently. Um, Actually, very prominently up until the day I was released. I was supposed to win the Deep South title uh, on that Thursday night on February. No, OVW taped on Wednesday. We taped on Thursday. I'm sorry. That Thursday, I was supposed to win the the Deep South title. So I knew like I was in line,
Hmm.
but I also knew I was debuting on SmackDown.
So, what were their
So
plans for you for SmackDown?
I don't know. That's how crazy it is. Like I have no idea. I'll just tell you like what happened. Um, I remember a guy, and I'm not going to say his name because why even say it, but he won the Deep South title that night. And I remember him, I was there earlier in the day, and he was like yelling about it, like, I'm going to win the title. And I'm like, fucking Mark. Like, and then I got told, like, it wasn't happening for me because I had just done SmackDown. But I had just done SmackDown is the weirdest thing. So somebody wrestled under my name, Danny Jamando, but it wasn't me. I got pulled from that match 5 minutes before it happened. And they put some jobber in, or, like, I don't mean jobber, like, because obviously I don't mind his work or anything, but I mean, they put somebody in my place. The idea we pitched was that, like, I had worked for WWF, for WWE for so long, and here's all the images of me and matches and matches and
Hmm.
matches and matches. I'm trying to get my foot in the door. Finally, I get my foot in the door. I'm buying tickets to come in because they can't shut the door on me. That was the idea, supposedly, something like that. And they were going to show all the footage from 10 years of me wrestling dark matches. And then I was trying to get in the door, and security doesn't know who I am because I'm not a WWE superstar. It was a whole thing we had worked out.
Hmm.
Um, but somebody came in and did my promo that night because I'm a 2-time New Jersey State Wrestling champion. And he cut my promo. And he said his name was Danny Jamando, and he cut my promo. And right then and there, that was a Tuesday night on SmackDown. And I was called, obviously flown to SmackDown for that. And I was like, something's wrong. So the next night when we go to, or 2 nights later, we go to Deep South, and this guy's bragging that he's winning the title, which I was supposed to win. Storyline wise, I was like, okay. And then I got a call that Friday night, which was the night after, about 12 o'clock at night, and was released. And I was just like really shocked because I'm like, I was supposed to debut this week. So
Mm-hmm.
like, what happened? And I've never gotten a word about what happened. I've talked to Bill DeMott after it happened. I've talked to Nova. I've talked to a bunch of different people that were higher up in the company at the time, and I've never gotten an answer. So I have no idea.
That's crazy. Ugh.
Yeah.
So did you know after your release that professional wrestling was something you were going to continue to do?
Uh, yeah, at the time, I mean, I went to Puerto Rico and I wrestled for IWA and Bushwhacker Luke for a while. I went overseas. I was doing like Africa,
Hmm.
doing tours with the Gallows and uh, going overseas a lot to make money. And then I was doing independence here. Independence in the U.S. doesn't really pay the best. But if you go on tours and stuff overseas, you can really make a decent living. So I was doing a lot more tours and stuff. Um, but at the time, it really took a mental toll on me. It really did. I had worked so hard for so long to have it all like kind of taken away and never given a reason why.
Hmm.
So mentally, it just really just destroyed me for a long time. For a very long time. And yeah, like my health and mental state. Uh, I have a well documented alcoholism problem. That's like I said, well documented. I don't have to go into it. But that's where that all came and like kind of flared up
Hmm.
on me until I got it into control, and did something about it. But I'm never, um, I'm not one to ever run away from that. I embrace it because I can go speak about it now. I can go do things about it now. I can go change other people with it now. So, um, but I'll be honest with you, like a lot of people that I'm friends with that have gotten released from WWE, even if they had a little bit of a career or even a year or two
Hmm.
years, they go through a really hard time because you really put so much work into everything you do. To have it all just get like basically flushed down the toilet
Hmm.
by a big corporate, let's say, it's disheartening for somebody, and you don't really have any fallback. Like there's no plan after wrestling.
Hmm.
I'm fortunate that I have a really good college degree and something to fall back on, which has created a career for me. But some people don't have that, and they're not as fortunate. And when you get let down like that, and and then realize after a couple of months when people aren't booking you anymore for that same money,
Hmm.
and then you're doing things for the same money you made when you were trying to get somewhere. To me, it's just not worth it anymore.
Have you had any conversations with WWE since your release?
I had a few. I had got some TV tapings they invited me to, and I had a few at the time. Uh, I those people that I had talks with no longer work for the company creative anymore, or are not executives in the company anymore. So um, it's kind of bittersweet because I don't know how to explain this, but I went from being so passionate about wrestling,
Hmm.
I became a father, and once I became a father, like wrestling just went to the side. Everything just went like, not about you. Now, don't get me wrong. Because of wrestling, I get residual checks from movies I've done, stunt work I've done, all after them. I've been in major motion pictures, doing stunts and acting. I'm a SAG actor and stuntman. Like I get little checks, like they keep getting lower and lower and lower. And I'll be honest, because I'm always honest. But like I'm able to make a living, still entertaining, but on a different level. And
Hmm.
to me, it's a level I can control. It's a level that I have say in, that I can take a job or not take a job. And believe it or not, when you go on an acting set to do something, I'm in charge of what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
I have a stunt coordinator a lot of times, and I have things, things that I've done, but I am saying everything. The producer doesn't know anything about what I'm doing. The director has no idea what I'm doing. They're like, "You're the professional. You tell us." So it's a completely different look at entertainment, uh, which is nice. Uh, just as far as the wrestling, once my daughter was born,
Mm-hmm.
nothing else mattered, man. That whole everything of that hurt about being let go by wrestling, or I had done a trial with Ring of Honor that was on the National Geographic Channel.
Mm-hmm.
They did a whole 1 hour, and I was featured probably half of that 1 hour. And Jim Cornette was there with Ring of Honor, and I I killed it. I had a great promo and match and everything, setting it up. Jerry Lynn was like, "You gotta hire this guy." Like, we were there, and then nothing happens. So I was hopeful that things were gonna happen after WWE, but like once I got to a point, especially once my daughter was conceived, I was just like, man, I don't care anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
and to this day, I'm still dealing with all the injuries and everything else. Like people don't realize, now I'm 47 years old. I've had injuries in my knees and surgery, and guess what? I'm still orthopedic, getting injections in my knees. They told me my ACL surgeries on both sides,
Mm-hmm.
they disintegrated basically over time. They just fail. So I'm having knee pain, shoulder pain. Um, and if you can't tell, like I had got in a car accident 2 weeks ago. I was riding my e-bike, which I love riding, in my town, and I got hit by a car. Came out of nowhere, and I'm getting my whole face reconstructed next week. You can't really tell by looking at me probably, but I know I've sent you the pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Like my entire nose and orbital sockets and everything are all broken. I have 20 something cracks in everything in my face. So, but that's not wrestling. That's just life. Um, I think I'm just fortunate to be where I am.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever comes in the future comes in the future. I loved wrestling, and I'll be honest with you, I used to hear old timers say I don't watch it anymore. Um, I'd be like, yeah, bullshit. I don't watch it anymore. I'll watch once in a while if I knew like one of my friends is on like in a prominent spot, like where I want to see something.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I've just been really, for somebody who's been so into wrestling my whole life, and I hate to say this, I hate to say it. I was so into wrestling. I lived it more than anything in the world. Loved it more than anything in the world. That I literally just don't care anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a bad thing to me. It's just like being a father and making sure I provide for my daughter
Mm-hmm.
and that sort of thing is what's my priority.
I couldn't agree more. If you had any advice to give to anybody getting into professional wrestling, what would it be?
Um, it's going to sound cliche, but go as far as you can as far as your education goes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm going to bet you 99% of the time you're not going to make it in pro wrestling. And I hate to say that, but you're not. I'm one of the fortunate few that, like, when I got signed by WWE, I was one of 50 people on the roster.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's not the case anymore. They're hiring hundreds of people. But the odds of making it and making it the way you want to make it, it's very few and far between. Um, if you have all the talent in the world, go for it. Really. Wrestling's changed a lot. It's not like you have to go through what I went through to become successful or have a career. It's completely different now. But seek out the right people that are going to lead you the right way, give you the right advice, because and be set up mentally for success, but be set up for failure.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say it the right way. Be set up for failure as well, because there's no fallback plan. So when it fails. And I don't want to see anybody fall as hard as I did. We didn't get into it a lot, but I felt pretty hard when I got released because I was that much in love with wrestling. I went through a lot of difficulties, through my life, and still things that affect me today. Um, be prepared for that, and there's no way to be prepared, but like get the right people involved. And if that's not your advice, then work your ass off and get yourself out there as much as you can. When I was out there, like 15 years old, I was in Maine, I'm in Florida, like I'm getting myself booked all over the country, meeting people, picking their brains. Don't think you're better than everybody else. Like literally, I would sit there with anybody who can give me advice. I would sit there and pick their brain. Just grab it all in. Wrestling now has become such a huge business again. But it's a different business. It's not pro wrestling anymore. It is sports entertainment, and it's completely different.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I would have had better luck in the '80s or better luck now, as far as the career went. But it's just much different. And I don't know how to like access or what's the word I want to use? Assess that, because it's so different.
Mm-hmm.
Really so different. And last time I was at SmackDown and I went backstage and saw some friends, it's just not the same. It's not. It's just not the same.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not explaining that, but it's not.
Danny, I just want to say thank you for what you've done for professional wrestling. Thank you for all the memories I had in OVW. I was fortunate enough to watch you for many years. To me, professional wrestling was OVW. That's anybody that goes back and watches what OVW was back then, they can't argue that. The work that you guys did. I mean, the arena was always loud. You were either getting cheered or booed. That, wrestling was real to those people. It was passion inside that Davis arena. And I cannot thank you enough for everything that you've done for professional wrestling, sir.
Man, that's pretty sweet to hear because you don't hear it often. Yeah, you're right, man. That the Danny Davis Arena, there is nothing in the place like it. And I'll tell you what, even people could say the ECW Arena, which I
Mm-hmm.
wrestled in, you know, there's nothing that replaces that Shepherdville Road in
Mm-hmm.
Louisville, Kentucky. There's nothing that replaces that. And if you were there for like the hot times that and you were there,
Mm-hmm.
um, like it was insane. Like it was just insane every single week. I'm grateful to have been a part of it. I'm grateful to have had a wrestling career. Grateful to hear that you're acknowledging that part of it, and I'm very grateful to anybody that watches this video, obviously, that just listens and
Mm-hmm.
respects the fact that everything we went through and respects everything that you're doing, for developmental wrestling and for anybody that just has been through that developmental system. It's not easy.
Mm-hmm. I hope that your surgery goes very well, sir. And if there's anything that you need, please feel free to reach out. I'll be sure to check in on you and make sure everything went well.
Well, thanks, good man. Sounds everything good. All right, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate it for having me. Thank you.